Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Timeshare Talks. And I'm your host, John Raymond, along with Irene Parker and Wayne Robinson. And tonight our guest will be Tiffany Renee, who's going to be talking about proposed FTC changes. And for those of you who are new with us tonight, a little bit about me. I have been a timeshare resale broker for over 20 years now, and I've helped hundreds of people buy and sell their timeshares. They've been very happy with both sides. I myself own 3 timeshares. We love using them. I've used them for over 20 years, and I really like the timeshares industry. Wayne Robinson, who's with us, is the author of the awesome book, Everything About Timeshares. And for any of you that own a timeshare or are thinking about it, you really should buy his book, and you'll find it on Amazon. Irene Parker has been an independent author for over 30 years and has owned timeshares for over 30 years. And she's helped a lot of folks help them sell their timeshares. So we're your hosts tonight, and I will have Wayne's information down below the subscribe button, which we hope you'll poke and join with us. And so you'll have all of his information down there to get his book. And I just wanted to let you know that our goals, we have 2 goals here at Timeshare Talks. And first is to educate and promote a viable secondary market for the timeshares. The second is to be a bridge between developers and timeshare owners. Well, last week our guest was Ron Roberts with Legacy Solutions, and he talked about the reluctance of many HOAs to allow for an exit program or a resale office on site. And what that brought up was Jake Pursue. And Jake Pursue is a board member of Tahoe Beach and Ski. And he's going to be with us next week to share what his resort and his HOA board are doing right. So I'm really excited to bring him on next week and hear from him. So Irene, would you introduce our guest tonight?
Yes, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Tiffany quite well under unfortunate circumstances. Her parents are absolutely devastated by their experience. And when you see YouTubes about timeshare, it's always, well, this company did this about me, to me, this company did this to me. And there's not a lot of proactive. So when someone has suffered harm from deceptive sales, we encourage them to think beyond their own situation and to become advocates for change. So a team of us that includes Tiffany have come up with some proposed changes. What we're going to do tonight is there's 10 changes, but 3 of them don't apply to Tiffany's parents. And I'm going to just go through the other 7, and Tiffany's going to talk about how that applied to her parents. And we're taking these proposed changes to lawmakers and regulators, and especially the Federal Trade Commission, because they have Section 5 of the Act that defines unfair and deceptive business practices, and every state has incorporated a portion of that act into their state law. And so with that, I'll just give a quick rundown of what happened to Tiffany's parents, and she'll be talking more about it. But Tiffany's parents owned 2 deeded weeks that they owned, and they loved those weeks for years and years. And they exchanged a week for Florida and were told by timeshare sales agents that if they didn't give up those deeds, Tiffany and her brother, who sadly passed away this year, would be liable. And if they didn't give up their deeds and buy points, their maintenance fees could go from $2,000 to $6,000. Well, after 11 hours, they gave up those deeds And not only did they lose those 2 deeds, but they lost $34,000, which was a lot of money to them. And so we're going to be talking about what changes need to be made so that doesn't happen, and to help educate the consumer to make sure that if you're buying a timeshare, it's for the right reason and it's something that your family can use and enjoy. So, Tiffany, I'm going to start with the first one, and you can tell me how your parents were affected by this. So, our first proposed change are consumers are routinely told that it's not a sales presentation, and that, but on the other hand, they are told that the meeting is mandatory. If you're on a promotional trip, it is mandatory, but because you just exchanged your timeshare, it wasn't. So how did that affect your family, um, being told that the meeting is mandatory?
Well, it really caught them off guard because it was the very first day that they arrived, and they didn't fly, they drove. So they drove from, the upper end of Indiana, on the border of Michigan, all the way to Florida for this trip. So the day that they arrived, as soon as they got in their room, they had a phone call that said it was mandatory that they attend. And they said, well, we didn't hear about this. Why didn't anyone say anything about this to us before? And they said, well, you don't have to go, but if you don't go, you're going to be fined $400 if you don't attend. So they kind of felt like their hands were tied, and they just got there and they were on limited funding and they didn't want to be charged an extra $400. So they went to this update, as they put it, a mandatory update meeting that turned out to be a hard sale instead.
Okay, and the second change that we proposed is that when you are given a proposal, and these proposals can be for $100,000 or more, that you're giving in one example, a senior couple was giving a proposal that the purchase price was $288,000 after adding all the purchases they did before, and there was additional equity of $244,000, and the net purchase was $43,000. And the disclosure, and these were seniors, the disclosure at the bottom read, distribution of this information to unauthorized persons not employed by agents of the company or to persons not listed on this option is prohibited and subject to penalty. So in other words, her parents were given a proposal, but they were not allowed to show that to Tiffany. Tiffany, did you understand how much money, what was going on? Because they were calling you during this presentation.
No, most of the complaints that I was receiving when she called was the fact that they were being held there in the first place. And they did kind of talk about what they were proposing, and he was there at the desk, and at one point they even handed the phone to him and I talked to him, and I just was like, no. Like, what are you telling my parents? So I was a little shocked to find out, hours later, halfway through their session, that they were still there. But my parents did repeatedly, like, their eyes aren't good, they don't read well, so they were kind of depending on him to read what the proposal was, since their eyes weren't very good to read it themselves, and they believed in him wholeheartedly that everything he was telling was the truth. They didn't have a reason to believe what he was saying wasn't. So like that, as the contract was read to them, and there was some points where he would actually point to the contract and say, see this part right here where it says this isn't what it actually is, but let me tell you how it's really going to happen, or how it's going to pan out in the future, kind of alluding that things were changing, but it wasn't in the contract yet, but it was going to be a part of it after they had signed.
Well, and then people always say, what do you mean they were there for 11 hours? Why didn't they just get up and walk out?
They took their IDs, and they said, I guess they're going to make copies of them. but they never gave them back. So my mom didn't want to leave until she got her IDs back. And they're very honest, trusting people. So they often don't understand if there's something happening that it would be borderline considered abusive. They're just kind of waiting to get the stuff back, and they can't leave without it, because where are they going to go, or what are they going to do? They can't.
Is that her internet?
I'm not sure, but we may have lost Renee. So
Let's hope she comes back.
yes, let's hope she comes back, and maybe we could hear from Wayne.
Yeah, well, this is typical for timeshare presentations. You don't have to attend anything. You don't have to do anything. There is no law that says you have to attend an owner upgrade. You don't have to attend anything, especially if you're on an exchange. There's nothing they can do. It's a scare tactic, and this needs to stop.
Well, sometimes you do have to attend a presentation, and if you are on a promotional trip or if you buy a trial product, you are required to attend a presentation.
Well, that's
But
different. I understand that.
Yeah, this case,
But if you're on an
not required.
exchange, no, you do not have to. If it's an exchange, you do not have to attend anything. You don't have to do anything. All you do is hang up, and that's the end of it. Once they get you, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to become your best friend, and they're going to keep you there. And the best way to get out of any timeshare presentation is to stand up and never, never, never sit down, because they don't want to draw any attention. That is the best thing. Just stand up and never, ever sit down. They're going to ask you to sit down. Once you sit down, they got you. Nope, I'm not sitting down. I'm standing up. And people are going to be looking at what's going on. Nope, I want out of here. Give me ID. Otherwise, I'm going to call 911. Trust me, they'll get you out of there that quick.
Well, the problem is, I'm a senior, and people that are seniors,
that's the problem.
we tend to be polite.
So I don't know what happened, and I lost you guys, but I
that's okay.
for a short while, and I'm hardwired to the internet, so I don't know what failed or what happened. It wasn't a Wi-Fi issue.
Well, that's great. Irene, you want to continue on now with the proposed changes?
Yeah, and one thing that started in 2017 is recording the closing session. And complaint after complaint after complaint is they told me what to say or not say on the recorded closing session. So if you were told, well, Hawaii is very valuable, and if you don't switch to these Hawaii points, only Hawaii points can be sold. But don't say anything to the recorded closing agent, because they don't want you buying these points just to sell them. And so, Tiffany, your parents were recorded, and that recorded closing was used against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my parents were kind of threatened with the idea that they were going to go through bankruptcy, which is something that had already occurred to them when the market was down, and my dad was part of GM. So unfortunately, they had already experienced bankruptcy before. So being told that this is a good possibility that they might end up bankrupt if they didn't switch these points over and avoid all of these expensive fees, being one of the last owners left, it was a reason to scare them into doing it, and not just to protect me and my siblings from having to absorb the costs, but if they didn't, they could also go bankrupt. So it was just another reason for them to seriously consider doing this. So my dad, he's kind of a prideful man too. He doesn't want people to think that he would ever have money problems. So in order for this contract to go through, they would have to say, yes, everything is fine. Yes, everything will work out and we won't have an issue, because they really didn't want to have the issue of going bankrupt right then and there. They wanted it to go through to avoid that. And unfortunately, by doing so, it's kind of what led them into almost going bankrupt anyway. We found out later that they were held for 11 hours because they wanted this resolved. then once they got up, the offer was no longer good. So they felt like they needed to find a solution, and they couldn't leave until there was a solution that everyone was going to be fine. So yeah, they were coached what to say, what not to say. They explained why. And, you know, how do you go up against a professional, I guess I can't say.
A felon.
A felon. Yeah, a felon. You know, they're really good at their craft. There are doctors and lawyers who have been scammed. You know, the twist of the tongue. They know how to say it. They know how to read your emotions, and they know how to get to you. And I actually found a print off that probably wasn't supposed to be a part of their paperwork, but it actually lists everywhere that they've been since they purchased back in '98. Every meeting they've tended to, at what resort, by whom, what was pitched to them, the reasons why they denied it. So they knew how to target them every time they came back, what angles worked, what angle didn't work. So they really, you know, it was very orchestrated very well of like, okay, well, this is going to work this time, and this is what we're going to use to get it. And it worked. And then I did a little research, and I found out my QA agent had actually spent 4 years in jail for having burglarized 7 homes, and some while occupied. And there was a few other charges on there that are not very fond, but for how could you have somebody hired to do this job knowing that they are a professional thief? And especially in money lending, like the guy has a few felonies. How is he doing this job?
Well, and Tiffany has volunteered her time to research other agents. And we have, not just Tiffany, but she's carried on this research, and we have 20 agents, and these are not just parking tickets. And I spoke to a former CEO of a bank, and he said these people, you know, they would have never been hired in lending. People who have been, have criminal records, arrested for forgery and identity theft and weapons and drugs and all kind of things. So
what state was this in, Tiffany?
Florida.
Most of these were in Florida. There were some charges also in Virginia too, which I was actually surprised to see, like a little more longer ago than the more recent ones.
You know, I'm a former real estate agent. I don't understand how they can keep their real estate license. You have to have, there's going to be a credit check or a criminal background check to get your license. How do they get away with this?
So do they need a real estate license in order to sell timeshare? Because it's not considered.
In Florida, you do, yes. In
Yes.
California and Florida, you do. Yes, you do.
So that's interesting, because I figured
Yes,
they
it is.
prefer them to do the job because they're so
Nope.
good at it.
They have
But
to have a license.
how are they doing it?
Well,
But
one
there
thing
are
that
people, I've worked at resorts where people don't have a license, and they'll hire them anyways, and their name's not on the contract, and they'll pay them. It's illegal. I've seen it.
a current former sales agent told me that in Florida, you have to have a real estate license, but you're exempted from the ethics continuing education requirement.
That makes sense.
So I don't know.
I wonder
So
if they're working under someone else who has the license, so they
What's
don't
under a broker?
themselves.
yeah, in
They're
North
signed to a
Carolina,
broker.
in North Carolina, there the timeshare industry lobbyists lobbied to have North Carolina agents not be required to have a real estate license. So one thing that we encourage, and we have a number of recordings of people who have recorded sales sessions. Now, Tiffany, your parents would not have known how to record their sales session, but you have to check each state to find out where that is legal to record without the other person knowing. But one person recorded their agent in Missouri, and that recording helped some other people. There were complaints that followed after that recording, and that recording helped other people as well. Okay, the next one is the recorded closing. You cannot listen to it unless you obtain a subpoena. And and then you can't, the attorney will not issue a subpoena unless you launch an arbitration case. So in the case of Tiffany, she had reached out to an attorney before she came to us, and it looks like we've lost Tiffany again. But if it's because her parents transferred the loan balance to a home equity loan, they were not allowed. It's just an attorney. It was, I think, $34,000, and to retain an attorney. And we're going to have an upcoming segment just on the pitfalls of arbitration, and which is not always viewed upon as a fair practice in America. But then the last statement that doesn't apply too much to Tiffany's parents, but I want to mention it, is the public offering statement. And we have another upcoming guest who is a board member from TARDA, Timeshare and Resort Developer Accountability, and she has just really delved into the public offering statement, and she will be coming on an upcoming show to do that. And the other thing, our other proposed change, the last one, is that the buyer really should be allowed 24 hours before signing the contract. In the case of Tiffany's parents, it was 11 hours. They were not even aware of what a contract rescission period is. And so it's, can you imagine how silly we would sound if we said we wanted to pass a law to allow people who are buying a house or a car 24 hours before having to make the purchase? You're not held, your driver's license are not withheld when you're looking at cars or houses and told that you can't leave and you have to buy today. Well, you may have a same day sale, but it's just so unfair. So
the difference, Irene, the difference is when you go buy a car, you plan on buying a car. You want to purchase a car for a reason. Nobody says, hey, honey, let's go buy a timeshare. No, most people don't do that. So as a timeshare sales agent, the first thing that you will learn is you have to sell today. Breaking the pact. That's what it's called, breaking the pact. Because the couples will go in and they'll say to each other before they go in, no matter what, honey, we're not going to buy anything. Okay? Can we agree to that? There's a pact. And the first thing that the sales agent needs to do is to break that pact. And one way to do that is, hey, warm up, get to know them. You're going to be their best friend, so they trust you. And to break that pact is to tell them, guys, you don't have to do anything today. So it lowers their inhibitions. You don't have to buy anything today. That's breaking the pact, and it makes them feel a lot better. However, if you do buy today, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this. But breaking the pact, if they don't sell today, there is zero sale. Zero. I don't mean people are going to think about it and come back. They will never come back. So that is driven into the sales meetings every single morning. It's today, today, today only. And if you're a new salesperson, oh, they promised me they're going to come back. No, they will not. You will not make any money. They'll fire you. It has to be today and today only, no matter what it takes.
Well, and Tiffany, then when your parents went to go to their deeded weeks because they asked that make sure that they had paid the maintenance fees that year, and then when they showed up at their deeded weeks in Virginia, they had been canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
they drove I think that was only a 12 or 13-hour drive to get to those resorts because they have to drive through the mountains. So they were very distraught to arrive to check in just to find out that they had no reservation, even though they were promised that they were made and that they were kept. And it just wasn't the case when they got there. They didn't know what to do because they couldn't find anywhere to put them. And there was a lady behind the desk that was able to find something for them, but they have 2 deeded weeks out there. So they were able to at least stay somewhere for the one, and then they had to drive back home. So
was it the same resort or was it an exchange?
No, this is their home resort.
Okay, you don't need a reservation for your home resort.
No, but they had given up their deeds.
So they had so when they took this trip to Florida, it was in December. So for that calendar year, they had deposited a week knowing that they were going to use it in Florida. So they went to their home resort for the 1 week and they didn't go to the second resort for the second week because they planned on trading that with the one in Florida, which they did. So come the end of June and July for the following calendar year, when they're going back to their home resort, they were told that there was nothing for them and they could not stay. So it wasn't that it was something they traded and that's why they didn't have it, because that was actually for the previous year. They still should have been there, and they are used to not having to make a reservation because it was a promised week. You know,
they have a confirmation with them? They have a confirmation with them?
No, they had given up the deeds, and yet the sales agents told them, don't worry about it. You paid the maintenance fees, so your reservation will be okay.
Yeah,
so when they showed up, they said, sorry, you're not.
No, you always got to have something in writing, always.
Yeah.
No. This was their home resort. You don't usually, I remember I would just get a thing that said, are you going to stay or are you going to have someone stay here? And I would send that in.
Yeah.
But then because they were promised, the sales agent said, oh no, you paid your maintenance fees for this year. So those reservations will be safe.
Yeah.
But the reservation, the time, the date, the size of the room, all of that should be in writing, should be in an email, a confirmation.
Yeah, but this was their home resort, so you don't need a confirmation. I mean, I owned at Maui Hill for 30 years. We didn't have a written confirmation. Well, we did have a written confirmation, but you knew that you were able. Did they have to have a written confirmation every time they went there?
If you exchange your deed for points, okay,
now you
still need a reservation.
Yes,
you need a confirmation.
No. They had given up. They had given up their deeds.
Yes.
So they weren't there anymore. But they had been going for 20 years, the same time, the same year, and yet they showed up this year because they had converted to points. There was no reservation.
Yeah, they were
okay. So when they converted to points, they need a reservation.
Right.
No.
Yeah. It was a new condition of the points that they had to let them know that they were still coming. If they didn't say they were coming, they would just assume that they weren't coming. And this was a new rule now that things were transferred to points. But they weren't used to those rules because they never had to do that in the last 20 so years.
Plus, the sales agents had said that they would check on
them to make sure
and their reservations were fine. Yeah.
So they didn't think anything of it. You know, my parents don't use email. They don't have this stuff. They just believed what they said, that yes, they called and they confirmed and they still have it and it's still reserved and it's in the books and you guys are good to go. And they took his word for it. It just was not the case.
And how are your parents feeling right now about all of this, Tiffany?
It changes from day to day. I know they were feeling pretty traumatized about it because it was a lot of mixed emotional feelings about, did they feel like they had been, scammed or bamboozled or, coerced into something that they didn't want in the first place. They were trying to do what was best for the family or for them to not go bankrupt. But in a way, it was almost pushing them towards bankrupt just by trying to do the right thing. So my dad felt very confused. My mom actually has a picture of him when they gave this proposal to them that if you don't do this, you're going to be owing all this money. You won't be able to afford it. And my dad didn't know how to respond to that. His head was actually down on his hands like this, bent over in his chair, like trying not to cry. because he thought once again that the family was like ruined by this unforeseen thing happening in the background of the industry that they were being told about. So they were kind of traumatized for a while. My mom couldn't even talk about it. It would send her heart into palpitations, and she would start to hyperventilate, and then she would have to hang up the phone with me. So it was very difficult for them, not just emotionally, but it was affecting their health also.
Well, I'm so happy that we've talked about these proposed changes, because I think they're good. I think they're good, and I hope that the FTC and others will help bring about that. I hope this show helps bring about some awareness to them, meaning the FTC, and I hope it brings about awareness to prospective buyers and those of you who are going to find yourself in a presentation. So, Wayne, do you have anything else you'd like to add tonight?
Like I've reiterated in the past, people just need to not trust the word of the sales agent, and they're very good at that. The first thing they do is greet, warm up, get to know you. They're your best friend. Everything has to be in writing. I don't care how friendly they are. Everything has to be in writing. And that timeshare presentation, you need to record it. From the time you meet them, the time you show up to the time you leave. If they say you cannot record it, then it's time to turn around and go back. Simple as that. Everything has to be in writing at this point or recorded somewhere. In fact, a video is even better.
That's great. Well, I think we've lost Tiffany again, but I think we're wrapped up for the evening.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say to Tiffany, thank you very much, Tiffany, for joining us tonight. She'll be able to watch this herself. So I'm glad I said that. And for those of you, we would encourage you to join us again next week. Again, when we have Jake Pursue here from the Tahoe Beach and Ski Club, who is one of the HOA members there. And they're doing great things there. And we'd like to hear from him. So
what's he going to be talking about next week? What's going to be the subject of the HOA?
What? Pardon me?
What's going to be the subject of the HOA? What is that meeting going to be
that's
about?
Good. Last week we had Ron Roberts here, who had the solution, Legacy Solutions, and there he's talking about HOAs who don't allow for some sort of an exit, some sort of helping people out of their timeshares that have been owners for many, many years. Now they want out. How do they get out? And here's Tiffany. How do they get out? Well, they're going to talk to somebody like me, and maybe their timeshare isn't worth anything. So how are they going to get out of it? The HOAs themselves actually need to have a way for them to give their timeshare back to the company, or to have a on-site sales program, so that the weeks that there's many weeks and many resorts that are vacant now because people have given up their deeds and are no longer paying maintenance fees. So what's really important for the HOA is to stay solvent, and Jake Pursue's HOA is doing good things there, and Ron Roberts was suggesting that there are many that aren't. And so we just wanted to hear from Jake to see what he's doing in his resort to make their resort solvent and help their current owners.
Good.
So guys, and Tiffany, you didn't hear because you somehow lost connection again, which is okay.
But I have a rolling blackout of our internet connection in my neighborhood. I'm sorry.
That's all right. But we did say thank you, Tiffany, for joining us tonight. It was a real pleasure to hear from you and hear about your parents. And we hope to have you back on the show again soon.
And we wish her a happy delivery. The due date is August 7, maybe.
7 May.
It almost was yesterday when we were talking.
Whichever comes sooner. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Well, guys, it's been good being with you again tonight. We'll see you again next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.